All right, everyone, welcome back. We're going to our weekly walkthrough with Robert B. Davis II. His book, Purpose and Form, The Necessary Basis of All Ethics. And in today's episode, we are going to be going over chapter 13, entitled The Great Mystery That Divine Perception is Dependent on or Connected to Physicality. Rob, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How you doing?
Doing very well. Can still see a little bit of sunlight poking through there on your end.
Yeah.
Over yonder in these here parts, it's pitch black outside already. And it's quite cold. It's like 45 degrees outside, so it's starting to get a little chilly. So Rob, could you please start us off with a synopsis of the chapter?
Sure. So, in a way, this chapter is an expansion of the previous chapter. Um, that chapter was sort of the culmination of part two so far of what we're talking about and getting down to the idea of purpose and form. And this is stepping off that and really driving home the point that purpose and form, that the connection of the infinite to the finite goes all the way down to the level of the physical body, uh, physical human body, as well as physicality in general. Um, and so it starts off with that and acknowledges that this is, a mystery. It's not something we can fully explain, but we can notice it. And then it talks a little bit about some more of the sort of misdirecting, unhelpful ways people have interpreted some Eastern ideas, such as karma and certain approaches to meditation, and some of the more specifically Zen ideas and what would you say, turns of phrases, maybe, or approaches that I think can be misleading and unhelpful, but that don't actually reflect something in the philosophy in themselves. It's more of just the interpretation that is taken in the West that gets in the way. So uh, it's an expansion of the last chapter, has some similar themes, but goes in deeper and more specifically emphasizing the fact that uh, the physical, the material, we should say specifically, the material aspect of life is an aspect of life. It's an aspect of the infinite, and the infinite has gone all the way down to that level and is joined to that level.
So initially, one of the first points that you made was that the infinite is fully immersed in the physical, in the material. It's we are a part of it. It is a part of us. Um, you begin by talking a little bit about Buddhism and those who follow Buddhist teachings, belief that the material or the physical is Maya or an illusion. Is that where people can misconstrue the idea of purposelessness and meaninglessness out of that is saying, okay, well, it's just an illusion anyway. It's not real, so why really engage with it?
Yeah, yeah, that's an aspect. That's like once people have, for the most part, they have come to that conclusion that that life is purposeless, and then so calling it all Maya, calling it illusion is an outgrowth of that. To say that life is illusion is to say that you don't believe there's purpose in form, that you don't believe that the individual life has purpose, has particular significance. Um, and part of what I talk about in there is how, again, sort of what we talked about before, but how Buddhism itself and really any coherent philosophy undermines this and negates it, because they tell you to do things with your body and they expect certain things to happen based on your actions through your body, and they communicate to you through a book, which is a material thing that you interact with. And digest through your material eyes, and you have to have eaten material food in order to be able to have the energy to do that. So really, to say that the material is an illusion is just, I mean, again, you're using the material to make the sounds that says this is an illusion. So how, like, was that an illusion? It comes back to the idea of, there's no truth. Okay, why are you talking to me?
Yeah, right. Uh, so then I guess the flip side of that, the other side is that, well, if the infinite, or as you coined it here in this chapter, is it divine perception? Um, if that is fully immersed with us on the physical realm, then I guess the other side of that would be to, well, now we need to engage with it as well, through engagement, which then leads to intimacy, which then leads to being effective, right? Um,
Yeah.
are there certain things then, like what are the steps, or what are some of the ways that engagement, that kind of reciprocation comes about?
Right. So this is more on that same point of, when whatever school it is, there's a particular set of methods that they recommend you enact. So if it's, you know, uh, not think of exact names at the moment, but if it's Chinese Buddhism, then they can be really strict on regular meditation regimens. If it's I don't know, Tibetan Buddhism, they might recommend something else. They tend to have, at least their stories are quite extreme of things that they'll have people do, but there's still uh, an understanding that certain actions lead to certain desirable consequences. If it's Christianity, meditate, pray, give alms, that sort of stuff. If it's, I mean, pick anything, they say this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is how we're supposed to be living. So everybody recognizes that when you what would you say, when you hone yourself and you apply a certain discipline, let's say you focus your activity, you limit certain kinds of engagements, cut off other kinds of engagements, that is going to bring about different results. And then each each school has a slightly different idea of what that might bring about, or what the particular path is to get the desired results. But everybody recognizes that there's a particular path of cultivation. So that's number one to recognize, and then which refutes all the ideas of purposeless, and the purposelessness of physicality. But so I would say, I mean, meditation, prayer, but even thought and contemplation. I have a quote somewhere, maybe it's in this chapter, the last one, where one of the Buddhist teachers says that um, theory and practice are the same thing. They're two sides of the same coin. So when you are theorizing about something, that is in a way practicing. It's not to say that that's all you need to do, but uh, the realm of thought, the realm of refining your ideas, and finding certain truths is part of the realm of cultivation as well. So searching for truth, acting charitably, um, praying, meditating, those are pretty foundational things that are generally effective.
Right. And I think of, even things just outside of religious practices that just help you get in a better mood, that kind of helps you realign yourself, I guess,
Right.
on that right path. There's multiple things. I mean, eating healthy, cutting out all the garbage food, all the high processed foods, drinking fresh, clean water consistently throughout the day, getting sunlight, grounding, taking your shoes off and go walking out in the grass a little bit, maybe hug a tree. I don't know, whatever tickles your fancy. Multiple things outside of, it's not necessarily you need to draw or come up with these elaborate occult incantations to, do crazy things. A lot
Right.
of it's basic and it's simple. It's sitting down, reducing the external stimulation and just being. Uh, and that kind of that leads me into, I guess, another important part of the chapter, and that's meditation. And I think that's an aspect of meditation, right? Is to reduce the amount of external stimuli, center yourself, and just kind of go within. But I think people misconstrue this by shutting off your mind, which is interesting because a lot of people deem this or term it as being mindful. You're practicing mindfulness. So it's kind of the opposite in that. Could you kind of talk a little bit about meditation as well?
Yeah. So you're right that I hadn't thought about that paradox before, but mindfulness versus the emptying of the mind. That's a good one. Uh, the I think the issue is that most people, frankly, don't have a very mm, well-defined concept of what's going on in their heads or in their minds. Uh, they think the little monologue that's going on in there is them, or uh,
Right.
whatever aspect of that is them. So then you get, well, I'm supposed to be doing something with my mind, so it has to do something with thoughts, and it's about being peaceful. My thoughts are bothering me, so therefore I must be seeking the place where there's no thoughts. Um, and maybe that's has been helpful for some people. Maybe that's why people speak that way. But for the most part, people find that very, sorry, very unhelpful and distracting because that leads you sort of naturally enact the technique there where you say, well, if I'm meditating, that means I have no thoughts. So that means I'm going to continuously turn my mind in and check to see if I'm having thoughts. But the problem is that action is itself driven by a thought. So you have to have the thought, am I thinking right now? That spurs that action. And so you're just centering yourself around that thought. And so in terms of the what you might call the Eastern, the more passive meditations, the idea is to detach from all those thoughts. And there's another quote from the same Buddhist teacher who says, don't worry about the fact that your mind's not clear. Don't worry about the fact that you're caught up in these issues because worrying about it is just adding another layer. So, um, so that's a counterintuitive point of meditation. And a lot of people will say, sitting down and doing meditation terribly is doing meditation properly. You're supposed to sit there and not get anything out of it and not have anything work. And so it can be frustrating and it can be disappointing as long as you think, that is your goal. And then, people say, oh, yeah, so you use this as a technique. You tell yourself that it's not about that. And then somewhere down the line, you have that experience where you do have no thoughts. And then that's what you were really looking for. And you just had to tell yourself this thing to get there. And then people, they skip the steps and they're like, oh, right. So that I am looking for that. So I should look for that. And it's just like, no, it's like, it's not about that. It's not about, um, achievement in that sense. It's not about, well, okay, if we're if we're going to talk about meditation, I'll go all the way with it then and say I wrote a blog post on the Visuddhimagga, which is a text, Buddhist, yes, Buddhist text on how to meditate, essentially, the most effective way to meditate. And again, that in itself proves the point of there's a purpose here and there are more effective ways than other ways. But within it, within the early stages of it, it lays out a pretty counterintuitive idea, and it says that the proximate cause of peacefulness or of a clear mind of meditation or of concentration or absorption, whatever particular word they use, the proximate cause of that is bliss. So it's actually not that you meditate and then become blissful. It's that because of the reality, the already present and given, gifted, not earned reality of blissfulness, therefore you are able to meditate. So you're drawing on this capacity that's already there in order to achieve, which isn't the right word, achieve the state of peacefulness or meditation or absorption. You don't, it's like the idea of truth, or sorry, I should say reason. Reason is there not because of my intellect. Reason is there because truth is there. Because truth is there, the reason is possible, and then my intellect is the thing that allows me to engage with reason. But the reason for reason is not my intellect. The reason is the presence of truth in itself. The same way, the reason or the cause of meditation is not me trying to meditate. It's the fact of a joyful, blissful, peaceful reality that underlies everything. So meditation is more about like resigning into that. That sounds weird for a positive state, but setting yourself on the hope, you might say, that that's true and that that reality does underlie everything and that it can shine forth, and just sitting in that and letting it blossom. That I think that's a far better way to explain it and pursue it. So
So you're saying, so just as reason is the tool for the intellect to become familiar with the truth, meditation is the tool for us to tap into an already pre-existing blissful state.
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Okay. And that's, I think most people have a difficult time with meditation for one of two reasons. One is that they're overly stimulated and can't be without their cell phones or without some sort of an anchor that takes up attention, um, which is understandable. I mean, at the early stages, I mean, it's a process, and that leads to
right.
this issue is it's not necessarily an instant gratification. It's not that kind of a process. It's delayed. Just as, if you go to the gym, you're not going to be jacked after your first workout. You're going
Mhm.
to go through some trials and tribulations, learning processes, it's gonna take a while for you to start to reap the rewards. But eventually they do come. And that hurdle, that stumbling block that most people face is I think they're anticipating that instant gratification, just as with everything else. But it takes that desire, it takes that engagement to go through the process and really familiarize yourself with the tool that meditation is, to then potentially get into tap into or tap into those states of blissfulness. um and going within, that's the key, and I look back at what you were saying with, you know you're concentrating on the fact that you don't want to think or you don't have a thought. But the very act of doing that requires thought. Just like, if you are in that state of meditation where you're experiencing that kind of uh, dissolvement, for lack of a better term, you can't identify it in the moment because the second you identify it within that moment, you're out of that.
Yeah.
It's more of a, oh, that's where I was.
Yeah.
You don't realize it until you've gone through it. Um, and again, I think that ties very well in with the idea that it does take that level of engagement and that effort to uh, unlock that divine perception, or at least to be guided in the direction of that divine perception. It's not like you can sit on the couch and listen to 12 hours of wealth affirmations and then receive a check in the mail for $2 million. Um, you can have that goal of achieving 2 million and you can see that, you can visualize it, you can feel it, but it takes that effort to get to that point. Um, and there's a pathway there, and you know straight away. Well, if I sit on the couch all day, that's not going to get me to where I'm going to go. But if I actively build my skill set, that's going to guide me more in that direction. I think it's very similar. If you engage in uh, stimulating or sinful activities, that's going to derail you from the path. But if you engage in virtuous, moral, just, and integrous activities, that's going to guide you more on the path. And it's not something I mean, you can maybe understand it conceptually with the intellect, but there's more that goes into it. There's more,
Yeah.
there's emotion, there's multiple things. There's that discernment and in order to fully, in my opinion, in order to really be able to hone in on a lot of these directions of where do you go, it takes time to go through some of that dissolvement. It takes, you can't be overly stimulated and overly saturated with uh, material things or external things to where it's going to derail you from that path. You can still engage with those things because, we are in this physical world, but in order to properly tap into that right direction, you do need to be at a state of stillness.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, don't want to make it sound too monkish. Like it's not that the monks and the hermits are the ones living the appropriate life and everyone else is failing, right? And I think that's part of purpose and form is that we are, the world is not an illusion. It's not something just to escape. There's purpose here, and we're supposed to be um, here doing things. We have jobs, we have purposes. So um, the stillness, I think a lot of the time, you know, you probably do need some sort of kickstart and reset that is more intensive, that is more focused, that is more intentional, where you draw back. But um, you don't have to be sitting still to be at peace, I guess is what I'm saying. That ultimately the message is, peace is universal, peace is sovereign. So and it's not opposed to this life, living life in the world. So it's not, peace isn't begrudging you while you're whatever driving to work or trying to get something done at work or cleaning the house or whatever it may be. So, I just want to put that as a balance to the because a lot of times people talk about meditation and then there's the sort of conjures the ideal of, well, therefore we should just all be meditating all the time, which maybe yes, but that might not look like what you think it looks like.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Though I do think that consistent or daily practice, or at least, just a moderately regular practice, it's like it has an after effect to where you can be, floating on down a lazy river, in one of those little floaty donuts, drinking a martini, or you could be running out of a burning building. Of course, both polar opposites, but and one, running out of a burning building is going to have, a lot of things going along with it, but you might still be at peace to the point to where you can make proper decisions and not
Yeah,
go crazy. So I agree. You can't be sitting down meditating all day, and it's not the 100% answer cure all, but it does provide those after effects throughout the remainder of your day, that I think helps accentuate that level of peace, regardless of whatever it is that you're doing.
right.
Um, I would like to go into uh karma a little bit here as well. You bring that up a little after the halfway point, and that ties in with meditation. So how does karma then tie in with that?
So specifically in at least some Buddhist teaching, but pretty mainline Buddhist teaching, how you'll generally hear it put, if it is going to a more technical level, is the idea that karma is the thing that keeps you in the world, and then meditation or the Buddhist lifestyle in general is a lifestyle or a technique which stops you from accruing karma. So it stops you from being um, trapped in the world. That obviously has a lot of baggage in the language about the world being a trap, the world being a prison, illusion, that sort of stuff. But it also makes this unhelpful view, and it ties to the purposeless thing, but it just sort of illustrates the problem of translating the language in that way. Because then the idea becomes, well, karma is what comes about through desire, intention, um, purposing something, seeking something. And if you take that literally, then you end up thinking, well, the problem is me desiring things. The problem is me focusing on things, intending things, purposing things. And therefore, the more enlightened way or the path to enlightenment is about destroying my own intentions and purposes and desires. We talked about that desire aspect a little bit before, but it can become about, well, if I just act completely spontaneously, if I just don't think about anything, if I never plan anything, that's the way to do it, because then I'm not accruing karma, whatever that means. But that's just silly, because if you're just acting on impulse, then you're a slave to your impulses. And it's not as though your impulses are unstructured, unpurposeful, um, undesirous. Like they're coming from desires, they have a purpose, they have a pattern, and they're leading you in a certain direction. So if you take this path literally, then you think, well, the Eastern path is recommending that you just don't cultivate yourself. The problem with everything is trying to cultivate yourself and getting all obsessed with it, and then the solution is just to not do that. It's like, well, no, because every path is about cultivating yourself in a certain way. So really, that is the point of me bringing up karma here, is just to illustrate again one of those unhelpful translations where, I mean, if you really think that that's the truth and that you shouldn't be cultivating yourself, then why are you listening to this podcast? Why are you reading books? Like, for those of us who are sane and aware of obvious reality, we cultivate ourselves and we get better. Now, we can't fall into the trap of thinking that through cultivation we will achieve infinite perfection, and therefore justify our own existences or uh, create a peace, create an eternal peace from our own actions somehow. I mean, eternal peace is only going to be, if eternal peace exists, then it already exists, and it has nothing to do with what we did. So, so that's always the caveat to the paths that talk about what we should be doing in action. And Christianity, I think, does a fairly good job at that. But so that needs to be said. But at the same time, it's just silly to say, oh, you don't need to cultivate yourself. The path to perfect peace is just not paying attention to your life and not structuring anything and having no intentions. And the Noble Eightfold Path includes right intention. So right off the bat, that's not a Buddhist philosophy. So
Right. I'd like to talk a little bit about karma because there's multiple ways that people view it. One is right, you don't want to accrue karma, so therefore you're just not going to engage in life. One other side would be, well, there is no karma, therefore I'm just going to do, like you said, whatever I want to do, do as thou wilt. There's no repercussion, there's no divine order. And you see a lot of that, I think, in various aspects of New Age, right? Where people uh say, well, you are God, not that there is an aspect of that divine perception within you that is within everybody, but it's like, no, you are God, and then everybody else is an NPC. And so you can just do whatever you want, and it's like Grand Theft Auto, enjoy yourself. Um,
right.
but and that seems to be prevailing in a lot of this new age. There's aspects, I think, of new age that where there's resonances of truth that I think get people hooked in. And then there's these other kind of bumps that they want you to digest that go along with it. And it's just it gets a lot of people. And I think with that, there is that idea of meaninglessness and purposelessness within that ideology or within that mental framework, because ultimately then if you are God, everybody else is an NPC, then what exactly are you doing here? What's going on? There's then did you create the divine order that you see around you? Did you, I mean, it just doesn't really seem to have some real truth resonance there within it. It's always so uh selfish, but kind of wrapped in this selfless paper. Um, and then on the other token with karma, there is kind of that balancing. There's scales. There's for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. You get this idea uh that there is that law, that justness, that divine order where if you don't act rightly, if you don't act correctly, there are repercussions that kind of guide you, that would hopefully serve as a warning or a guide to bring you back in. And that I think ties in also with causality as well, where there's fallibility, right? Where, well, if you do something maybe that you shouldn't have done, there'll be kind of a lesson learned, hopefully, and then you'll act correctly after that. um but outside of that, if there isn't that causality, if there isn't that karmic balance, if there isn't that kind of divine order, uh and you're the one that's creating everything, and everybody else is an NPC, it just, I don't know, that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah. So a couple things on so I think in terms of the three types of karma you're talking about, one would be get rid of karma. And that's the idea that our life is literally purposeless. It's a trap, it's an illusion, and we just need to escape it. And then, so that can breed an amorality where, things here aren't important, so
Mhm.
they're not important. Uh, or there's the idea that there's no repercussions, there's no judgment, there's no bounds, which again kind of goes on the idea of, well, that's because things are an illusion and not important and purposeless. So the sort of two extremes are almost the same thing at the end. And then the third one you were talking about is, well, it's the idea of divine justice, that there is purpose and form, that there's a reason why things are ordered the way they are, and actions are taken into account and intentions are taken into account, and certain things happen to you for reasons, and you're supposed to get something out of them, and you're supposed to handle them in a certain way, but if you don't, then something else happens, and then you have to deal with that. And that's the idea of divine order, that the cosmos and is ordered down to the level of your physical actions, your emotional desires, intentions, your mental states, all that sort of stuff being taken into account. So broadly speaking, I do think that's the only one that actually makes sense. And the other two, you can kind of get there by literally reading some philosophical or esoteric texts, but they don't, if you actually push on them and try to create a worldview out of them, they don't work. In some of the ways we've been saying, like the idea that the world is an illusion. Okay, you got that idea through the world, through materiality. Someone said it, a book confirmed it for you. Maybe, oh, it's just my intuition. Well, okay, but someone helped you to build up to that intuition and to spark it and to affirm it and to make you more confident in it. And you achieve that all because you didn't starve to death, because you've been eating food and your brain's functioning, you think properly. So, like, it's dependent on physical materiality. That's part of the process. Even if you think the process is, leading you to see that what's in front of you is a trick, an illusion, and you're the guy who needs, you're the not NPC who needs to escape it. Like, okay, but that's still a purpose that you're enacting, and it involves your physical organism doing part of the work, even if it's just sitting in a corner. And that's why Buddhism is not about rejecting your body, and Hinduism recommends yoga because you have to do things with your body in order to be in the state where you can sit in the corner and do nothing, because that is actually hard on your body and you have to be prepared for it and you have to cultivate that. So I mean, that's basically the Gnostic philosophy, and that's where it falls apart, is because people write books about Gnostic philosophy, and books are material objects and you read them with your material eyes, and so
Yeah, dude.
your
Yeah.
purpose is embedded in the material world. That's just undeniable.
That's it. Boom, boom, mic drop. Boom, 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 boom. Yes, sir. That's it. I mean, it's like it's that paradox. It's like, well, I'm gonna stand on this hill and I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the importance of the meaning of meaninglessness, and the purpose that I have to purport purposelessness. It's just wild stuff.
So, on the point that you were saying on New Age as well, this reminded me of something I learned fairly recently. And, I came out of a lot of the New Age studies and whatnot, but I had studied Buddhism fairly seriously as well. And the I saw this video within the last couple of years where the title was "What is pre-lust?" And I was like, I don't know. What is that? I don't know what pre-lust is. And it's a Christian channel, and it's this word that basically means a false or bad spiritual experience, or a misleading spiritual experience. And they point out, and I wholeheartedly agree, I think it's almost um, undoubtable that the New Age movement doesn't have that concept. They believe all spiritual experiences are worthwhile or good. They don't have a concept that there could be a spiritual experience that would be unwholesome or misleading or unhelpful. That might be not true in absolutely every case, but in general, there's not an established skepticism towards spiritual experiences. Just let's get everybody spiritual experiences and then the world will be better. Um, and the interesting thing is Buddhism is very much on board with the idea that there are spiritual states which are not helpful or misleading or not the goal. And that's a huge part of the Buddha's journey and the teachings is that you have to reject certain spiritual states, even ones that seem amazing. And so from my studies in that, I was like, oh yeah, like I'm sort of already on board with that. And I hadn't particularly noticed prior to the that lack in the New Age movement. But then when it was pointed out, it was like, oh yeah, that is something that I got from Buddhism, but is not present in the New Age stuff. And so, and this ties back to the Buddhism issue. Like so many of the modern Western spiritual but not religious people, whatever, um, or just people rejecting Christianity and looking at Buddhism as a philosophy, essentially take Buddhist ideas and then they just plug them in their framework to support either their New Age spiritualism or Gnosticism, basically. So they view it through a Gnostic lens, and they're like, "Oh, look, Buddhism's Gnosticism. It's about escaping the world, and nothing's meaningful, and things are just a trap, and the goal is to get out of here." Or like Harari did, they say, "Oh, look, Buddhism is nihilism. He's talking about purposelessness," and it's like, yeah, but he set up a specific way of living, and he set up a community of people that function socially in different class. Like it's not that simple. It's not just he rejected the world and the world is a trap. Not to say that Buddhism is perfect or that it doesn't include things that can point in that direction, but there's a lot there that gets overlooked. And especially that idea of rejecting spiritual states based on discernment and based on saying, there's a particular thing that we're after and it needs to satisfy certain requirements. And so I think that ties right in with the issue as well in terms of how we approach karma and the issue you were talking about of people, looking at themselves as gods and looking at themselves as the creators and manifestors of whatever they want. I believe wholeheartedly that they believe that. I mean, there's certainly contradictions and there's ways you can get out of it pretty easily with some humility, but there's certainly the reality that people get into that state. In Jungian terms, that would be called inflation, and it does carry people away. And it is a convincing spiritual state for a while. The issue is for a while because it falls apart. But so having that idea of yes, we want to have an awareness of the spiritual realm, but not we can't just say anything spiritual is good, and we still have to practice discernment, and we still have to say, where is this leading me? Is this where I want to go? Is this going to be satisfying, fulfilling, um, even on that spiritual level? So
Yeah, I think of the analogy of like somebody that wants to lose 200 pounds, right? So one way is you can experience that delayed gratification and learn the proper habits, the proper lifestyle, and literally change yourself to then embody somebody that is 200 pounds lighter than what you currently are. Um, and then maintain that, right? So if we're looking at then the opposite of like, okay, well, I'm just going to take this crazy pill or this crazy instant thing that just zaps the weight off, you're still that person that's 200 pounds heavier, even though you're 200 pounds lighter, because you haven't made that shift that takes time and effort and that takes engagement to then embody that version of yourself. I think of the same thing with experiencing spiritual states, right? So for lack of a better term, there is somewhat of an initiation process to then achieve certain levels, right? Whether it's through the right way of living, through daily meditation. And it's like you can't take the reason out of it and just force your intellect into truth. just as you can't force your being into bliss without engaging in specific tools and activities that are available to you that can then get you there. And that's why I think a lot of this new age has it wrong too, where it's like, well, just go down to South America and take a little ayahuasca and you're going to be right where you are. Take these pills, take this drug, and you might experience some heightened altered perception. You might tap into something, but that permission wasn't necessarily granted, and therefore there could be some consequences for that. And so I think that's where a lot of the new age people think, hey, there's no such thing as a bad spiritual experience. They'll call it a bad trip, right? But there's no such thing as a bad spiritual experience. um but again, I personally, and I think with what you're saying as well, that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, there's multiple um teachings in religions that say that, as well as, once you kind of look at good, I guess, good and evil, good and bad there as well. If you're not necessarily resonating at a specific level to uh find something and then not necessarily hold on to it forever, it may be fleeting, but at least you're engaging activities that prolong that sense, as opposed to just something that you take once, you have a crazy roller coaster ride of an experience, and you have no idea what to make of it. And it might have some negative, detrimental, long-lasting effects as well tied to that. So I think there's a lot of danger in that, because a lot of people, especially with the internet and everything, like, people are being subjected to vast amounts of information that were only given or exposed to a select few people. And that's fantastic. I mean, that's really good that people have access now to information. But the negative side of that is you might be tapping into things, you might be, exposing yourself to certain information that, you might not be ready for.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And then so that's kind of brings to the subtitle of the book, right? Purpose informed the necessary basis of all ethics. So that's kind of the point is there's an ethical way of being. And, unless you're, again, actually going to take the full step and say absolute nihilism, I don't believe in ethics at all. Like, no, almost no one does that. And if anyone does, no one listens to them because we no one wants to actually, no one thinks that actually a world without ethics is a good world.
Mhm.
And then so like the people have to sort of hide it, but they call it antinatalism, or they call it, whatever. They dress up their lack of ethics or their evil ethics under what sounds good. Um, but the idea is, and the reality is, there are ways of being that are life-giving, right? That's true on, like you were talking about, on the physical level in terms of health. That's true on the spiritual level. It's true on every level. And you, and again, as I was pointing out, every tradition recognizes they give you specific things to do because there are certain things that you should do over other things. And so ethics is really is implied in all that, and is really just the, you might say, the moral slash emotional realm of how to, the right way to act that is in accord with um, being effective and promoting life that accounts for human consciousness and human interaction as well as part of the real world. Again, our consciousness are significant. It's the nihilist claim that our consciousnesses are not significant. And then you get to the idea of, well, it's all just feelings and I can just do whatever and I can disregard my feelings or someone else's feelings and I can, everyone's an NPC and I create my own meaning and reality and, go off and I'm the god of my own universe, versus there are proper modes of being and improper modes of being. And there are parameters that are laid out that I didn't set, and I don't get to choose. So, so I think that you you have the two go together. Once you've realized that there is clearly purpose in this life, whether through the mundaneness of when I go out and start my car, I don't try to start my car with a folded up piece of paper or a my pinky, or I don't sneeze at it and hope it's going to start. Like there's a key that goes in and starts the car. Or, if I want to lose weight and keep it off, then diet and exercise, same as it's always been. Um, if I want to get over some trauma, there might be various uh, debates nowadays on how to do that, but they're still going to recommend a particular way over other ways. And they say this is the most effective. You have to do these particular things. So there's a purpose in them, and it leads to particular causes. So on every level, there's this clear purpose in form. There's this clear proceeding, this clear cause and effect, and it's ordered in a particular way. And once you have that, ethics is tied in immediately. If you want to get rid of ethics, you're also getting rid of purpose and form. They just go together, and you can't escape. You can't detach the one from the other. So you can't have a world where you have a meaningful path and something to seek, something to do, adventure to go on, whatever it is, and it be an amoral world. Those two have to go together. If you have a path, if you have a purpose that's significant, that's not just something you made up and you're an insignificant being, so it's insignificant. If you are significant, if your path is significant, if your path is ordered, which it clearly is, these words are ordered, they're making sense in your brain, hopefully, because there's order and because you're part of an order. Like you can't escape it, is kind of my point. But and then ethics is just part of that. And then you can kind of get tricked and think, well, I've got sort of the purpose or the create your own purpose thing, and that'll be satisfying, but I don't need the ethics thing because whatever. But the only reason for not needing the ethics thing would be life doesn't really matter, other people don't really matter. You have to deny everything at a foundational level in order to escape the obvious reality that some things are evil and some things are good,
Right.
even if it gets murky and difficult in the middle ground.
Right. And so I would say to anybody, like you mentioned at the beginning of the book, this is meant for those that are pretty down deep into the pits of despair.
Mhm.
You know, unless and I've again there are some outliers, of course, but typically most people have experienced a sense of just peace within themselves at some point, at some point. And I would go as far as to say that when you're experiencing that sense of peace, you were living ethically. You're not necessarily at peace thinking, "Oh, well, I'm so content after just lying my butt off and stealing all this money from people and just being a complete knucklehead." It's, when people think of good times, they might say, "Oh, well, I had a really good weekend with the boys down in Vegas," but it's not that. It's when were
Right.
you
Epic times are different than good times.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
And then what else, just to clarify, living ethically is not the same as living perfectly.
Right. Right. And that ties in with, being fallible, just, and then
Right.
having patience with yourself, having forgiveness. Um, but because everyone has been able to tap into that before, it's possible to do it again. And just like, you talk to a lot of guys out there and the start of their workout journey was to get the ladies,
Mhm.
but through the process of working out, you start to be accustomed to all of the incredible benefits that go along with it, and it becomes a part of you. So may have been the initial catalyst to begin that journey is number 999 on the list of reasons why you're doing it later on.
Yeah.
You're then kind of guided through that journey and that process. So you might initially want to tap into that feeling of peace because you don't like feeling depressed all the time. And so you start to engage in behaviors that promote that level of peace. And then through consistency and through time and through engagement, you realize that it's no longer to then keep you from falling back into depression. There's new things now that help propel you forward along that journey. And that
Right.
comes along with that process. Um, and so I think that when people try to conceptualize with their intellect what purpose and form is, what it means, what divine order is, what is divine perception, what is infinity, you can get a somewhat of a rudimentary conceptualization, but it's through that action. It's through starting to embody that process and that journey where there's then that unlifting of the veil, or there's that kind of that revealing to you. Uh, and that's not done through instant gratification or through anything like that. It's done through a process, through living rightly, through living justly, through living ethically.
Right. Right. And then just to emphasize another aspect of that, the it's not that we live ethically or we live divinely or whatever it is, and that creates divine peace that makes it happen in your life. It's that divine peace is there, but there because divinity is connected to and interested in and intimate with all the way down to form and physicality. Therefore, there are particular ways of living and of conducting yourself that are in harmony with the divine. Um, and living those ways does not create the divine,
Hmm.
but it allows you to commune with the divine.
Right.
So it's not on your, not that you have to earn divinity, not that you have to establish peace. It's that you are you have to go walk where God is walking. And the good news is the door is open and you're welcome anytime, right? And that's the forgiveness aspect. That's why we don't have to be living ethically is not living perfectly, because we couldn't do that. And if it was that we had to live in a certain way in order to make heaven, in order to earn it, to create it, to achieve it, then we would never get there. It'd be impossible. But because heaven, the union of the divine and the material, is there, is real despite us, um, and it's amazingly charitable and loving and forgiving, then um, we can enter into communion with it. We can engage with it and enter into an intimate relationship with it.
Like a
So
remembrance, isn't it? It's kind of like a remembrance because it's always been there. It's just up to you to then
mhm.
remember that it's there.
Yeah, and then also the idea of remembrance in terms of like again, members are like your arms, like putting things
Yeah.
back together. So
Yeah.
like you're an arm of the divine that's being reattached,
Yeah.
and now you go and you're living part. You are an extension of the divine life once you have remembered that that is what you are.
Yeah. That's it.
Mhm.
All right, Rob, do you have anything else that you want to touch on with the chapter before we conclude?
Um, no, I don't think so.
Okay. Okay. All right, everybody. So that was chapter 13, The Great Mystery That Divine Perception is Dependent on or Connected to Physicality. And we'll go ahead and just read this quote here that you have right below the title. The ways that lead to conscious realization are many, but they follow definite laws. And that is Carl Jung. That ties in, but they follow definite laws. Yes, because we are in the finite. Um, the next chapter, 14, is going to be is titled A Modern Religious Story. So we're going to take a 1 week break, but we will go ahead and start the following week, which will give you viewing at home plenty of time to pick up this book. This is Purpose Informed, the Necessary Basis of All Ethics by Robert B. Davis. You can find this book on Amazon. If you put in the search bar Purpose Informed, you will also have to put Robert B. Davis second in there as well for it to come up. Or you can go ahead and click the link below in the description, which will go ahead and get you right to the book. Also in the description, there is a link to Rob's personal website where you can find all of his work, more about him. He has a couple of links to some Substacks as well. One is Defund the Fun Police, and the other one is Controlled Abundance. But there's what's the
Living under controlled abundance.
under controlled abundance, which he is releasing right now as a serial. So he's releasing it's kind of broken down into smaller chapters, and so he's releasing a chapter per week. Highly recommended. I read it last week and really, really enjoyed it. And I know that you will too. So please check that out. Um, Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you've enjoyed this conversation. Please feel free to leave a comment below, throw us a like, and we'll go ahead and see you next week. Thank you. God bless, and may peace be with you.